Watch what happens when someone encounters a very aggressive person. Most people react. They get tense. They either fight back or they withdraw. Their nervous system syncs up with the aggressive person's nervous system. There's an escalation, a clash of energies, a collision, but then watch someone else encounter the same aggressive person. This person does something completely different. They don't tense up. They don't fight back. They don't seem bothered. They seem genuinely interested in what the aggressive person is saying. They observe, they listen, they stay calm, and something remarkable happens. The aggressive person's aggression has nowhere to land. It's like throwing a punch at someone who isn't standing where you expected them to be. The aggressor stumbles. The aggressive energy dissipates. The aggressor often ends up confused or even calming down. So what is the person doing that diffuses the aggression without actually confronting it? Why is it that staying calm and observing is more powerful than any direct response? The answer reveals something about aggression itself that most people never think about because they're too busy reacting to it. Aggression is not actually a standalone state. Aggression is a nervous system pattern that requires a response to continue. It requires someone to cinch up with it, to mirror it, to react to it. When aggression meets a nervous system that is calm, that is observing, that is not mirroring the aggression has no one to synchronize with. It has no reflection. It has nowhere to go. It's like sound in an anechoic chamber. It doesn't bounce off anything. It just dissipates. The aggressive person is left with their own energy and nowhere to put it, and that's deeply disorienting. Think about what actually happens inside an aggressive person's nervous system when they're expecting escalation and instead encounter calm. Their brain has predicted an outcome. They've predicted that they'll be attacked, or that they'll defend, or that there will be conflict. Their nervous system has prepared for this. Their body is activated. Their adrenaline is up. And then none of that happens. Instead, they encounter someone who is genuinely observing them, genuinely curious about them, genuinely not threatened. The prediction fails. And when predictions fail at the nervous system level, there's a kind of confusion. The aggressive person doesn't know how to respond because their neural pattern for how this interaction should go is not matching what's actually happening. Here's what's crucial to understand about aggression. It is a pattern. The aggressive person has a pattern of how conflict goes. They've learned over years of interactions that if they escalate, people respond in certain ways. Some people fight back. Some people submit. Some people get emotional. The aggressive person knows these patterns. They're familiar with them. They know how to navigate conflict because they understand the responses they're likely to get. But the person who observes calmly, who doesn't match the pattern, who responds in completely unexpected ways, is operating outside the aggressive person's learned patterns. And operating outside someone's learned patterns is disorienting to them. Let's look at how this actually manifests in specific situations. Someone is in an argument with an aggressive boss. The boss is yelling, making demands, being disrespectful, testing to see how far they can push. Most employees either yell back, which confirms that there's a conflict and escalates it, or they shrink, which confirms that the boss has power and encourages the boss to push further. But an employee who stays calm, who observes the boss's behavior with genuine curiosity, who might even ask a genuine question like, "What's making you so frustrated?" is operating outside the boss's expected pattern. The boss is expecting conflict or submission. Instead, they're getting observed. And that observation, that genuine curiosity without judgment, is disorienting. The boss's nervous system was activated for conflict. But there's no conflict. The boss's nervous system was prepared to either dominate or be dominated, but neither is happening. Instead, the boss is being genuinely listened to and observed. And this creates confusion in the boss's system. The aggressive energy, which was looking for a target, has nowhere to go. And often, without the escalation or submission they were expecting, the boss's nervous system starts to calm down. The employee hasn't fought back. They haven't submitted. They've simply observed. And that observation is what diffuses the situation. Now let's talk about what the observer actually has access to that the aggressor doesn't. While the aggressor is activated, emotional in their nervous system's fight or flight response, they're not really paying attention. They're not gathering information. They're operating on automatic patterns. But the person who stays calm, who observes, is gathering vast amounts of information. They're watching what triggers the aggression. They're noticing patterns in what the aggressor is saying and doing. They're understanding the aggressor's psychology. They're building a model of the aggressor's patterns. And with that model, they can predict the aggressor's next moves. This is a massive information asymmetry. The aggressor is activated and reactive. The observer is calm and strategic. This is why the observer ends up with far more power in the interaction than the aggressor, despite the aggressor being the one displaying power. The aggressor is using all their energy to aggress. The observer is using their energy to understand. And understanding, once achieved, is power. By the end of the interaction, the observer knows far more about the aggressor than the aggressor knows about the observer. The observer knows what triggers the aggressor. The observer knows what the aggressor's patterns are. The observer knows what works and what doesn't with this person. And the aggressor knows nothing. They haven't learned anything about the observer because they were too busy expressing themselves to actually pay attention. Think about what this means for multiple interactions. The first time someone encounters the aggressor, the observer is learning. The first time the aggressor encounters the aggressor is learning nothing. By the second interaction, the observer already has a model. The observer already knows roughly how the aggressor will respond. The observer can predict the patterns. The aggressor is encountering someone who is already familiar with them. And that familiarity, that sense that the observer has already figured them out, is what makes the observer seem powerful and the aggressor seem predictable. This is also why aggressive people are often fascinated by people who don't react to their aggression. They're used to people cinching up, mirroring, responding, but the person who observes without reacting is a mystery to them. And mysteries are compelling. People want to solve mysteries. The aggressive person might actually start trying to understand what's going on with this person who isn't responding the way people are supposed to respond. And in trying to understand the observer, the aggressor stops aggressing. The aggressor's focus shifts from attacking to understanding. Here's something worth understanding about the relationship between observation and safety. When you're observing, when you're gathered in your own nervous system, when you're calm, you're actually safer. You have more options. You're not locked into a reactive pattern. You can see what's coming. You can adjust. But the person who reacts, who matches the aggressor's energy, is locked into the conflict pattern. They're dancing with the aggressor. They're following the aggressor's lead. They don't have options because they're responding to what the aggressor does rather than acting from their own choice. Think about martial arts. The master martial artist doesn't match the opponent's energy. The master observes. The master stays calm. The master watches the patterns. And then the master moves not in reaction to the opponent, but from a place of having already understood what the opponent is going to do. The opponent is fast and aggressive. The master is slower but strategic. And in a conflict, strategic beats fast and aggressive almost every time because strategy is informed by observation. This same principle applies to all forms of aggression, not just physical. Someone is trying to manipulate you through guilt or shame. If you react emotionally, if you get defensive, if you argue, you're cinching up with their pattern. You're dancing with them. But if you observe, if you genuinely get curious about what they're trying to do and why, if you stay calm and just note the pattern without reacting to it, you've removed yourself from their game. And once you're out of their game, their manipulation has no effect. Now let's talk about what it actually takes to stay calm and observant when someone is being aggressive toward you. This is not about being a doormat or accepting disrespect. It's not about being passive. It's about choosing to operate from a different level. It's about understanding that the aggressive person is playing a game that requires your participation to continue. And you're choosing not to participate. You're choosing to observe the game instead. This requires a certain internal security. It requires believing that you don't have to win the conflict because you're not actually in the conflict. You're above it. You're observing it. And from that observation point, you have all the power. This also means that one of the most valuable skills you can develop is the ability to stay curious in the face of aggression. When someone is attacking you, when someone is being aggressive, to stay genuinely curious about what's driving it, what they need, what they're afraid of, is to remove yourself from the conflict and move into observation. Genuine curiosity is incompatible with reactive aggression. If you're genuinely curious, you can't also be defending. If you're genuinely interested in understanding the aggressor, you can't also be fighting. And that shift from fighting to understanding, from defending to observing, is what changes the entire dynamic. There's also something worth understanding about the fear that aggressive people feel. Aggressive people are often afraid. They're afraid of being vulnerable, so they aggress to create distance. They're afraid of being exposed, so they create a lot of noise and activity. They're afraid of being controlled, so they try to control first. And the person who stays calm, who observes, who is clearly not threatened, who is clearly not trying to control them, is actually threatening to the aggressive person, because the aggressive person doesn't know how to respond to someone who is not playing the game. This is why some of the most powerful people you know might be the ones who are least reactive. They encounter an aggressive person and they don't match it. They observe, they stay curious, they don't try to win the conflict. They just try to understand it. And because they're operating from this place of observation and understanding, they end up with far more influence over the aggressive person than the person who tries to fight. Think about what this means for how you actually encounter aggressive people in your life. Instead of bracing for conflict, instead of preparing to fight or defend, what if you stayed genuinely curious? What if you observed them like you were observing an interesting phenomenon? What if you tried to understand what was driving their aggression without taking it personally? What if you refused to sync your nervous system with their nervous system? What would happen? The closing paradox that should sit with you is profound. The only way to truly neutralize aggression is to refuse to meet it with counteraggression.